now, it was 64-ounce real Coke, 3 or 4 times a day. I mean, just, now it's this, anyway. So I go in, and there's Maria Braemar. I've known Maria since she was a little kid. He goes, "Oh, Larry Pollard, how are you? I haven't seen you." And as she says that, there's a man standing. There's just a few of us. A man standing. He goes, "Oh, you're Larry Pollard." And I look at him and I go, "Yeah." He says, "Everybody in this town tells me that you look like me." And I looked at him for a minute and I said, "No, I don't think so." I said, "You do resemble me, though." His name's Reggie Corliss. So we go forward a couple of months, and we're at this musical thing that's going on, and we take the family. It's about 800, 900 people there. And at intermission, Corey's got to go to the bathroom. So I take Corey to the bathroom, and, you know, he's all done. He goes to go back, and someone I know interrupts me, and I mean, we know everybody. So I said, "Corey, go and sit down by Mama. Tell her I'll be there in a few minutes. I want to finish talking to so-and-so." So he goes, and a few minutes later, I feel this tugging at my pants, and and it's Corey. And Corey says, "Daddy, Uncle Jerry's here." I said, "Really? Which one is Uncle Jerry?" Guess who he points out? Reggie Corliss, the guy who thinks that I look like him, that you know, when you're fraternal, you resemble one another. Now, is that true knowledge? It's based on sense experience. As far as Corey was concerned, that was Uncle Jerry. I'd explained to him it was, and he learned it right away. But the first impression was, "Gee, Daddy, who made the moon?" First impression. Do we learn by impressions first or not? Little kids have the capacity to reason, but they don't pop out of the oven reasoning. We give them that tool. It's a tool to sit down and be rational, to think through things from beginning to end, whether you do it deductively with formulas, or whether you do it inductively with experiences and you draw conclusions. This is the argument they're going to have. And rationalists in the West have had this argument, and it's never ceased. How do you come to know something? And once you know something, how do you know that you know the truth? Or is there any chance it could be a variable? Is there any chance you could be wrong? And I gave you the example last time we got together about the big harvest orange moon, and then I gave you that in this class, and then the yellow moon, and it's neither one of them. And yet the moon is real. Does it have a creative force behind it? Belief tells some people yes. Other people disregard belief because it's not foundational. We can't prove it. So we try and make sense of the world we live in. And that's what epistemology does. Do you follow that? Now, these two ideas don't have to be exclusive either. They could go together. You have a brain, and you have the capacity to be reasonable about using it. We can be irrational too, but we have the capacity to be reasonable, not just deductive, but we have the capacity to be reasonable. So come down and let us reason together. Let's have a conversation. Let's talk it out. And some people are just absolutely convinced based on perceptions. The color red for me is candy apple red. That's not red. It's orange red. That's more burgundy red. That's burgundy red. But that's just me. When I see a Chevy, that is not a red car. Very rarely do I see a truly red car, because for me, candy apple red is red. Now, I know that orangey red is red, and I know they all fit in the palette, but my perceptions tell me no. When someone goes, "Wow, that's a hot-looking red car," so no, it's not. It's a hot-looking car. It's not red. And I cannot find one yet. I want to find a cup, this kind of turquoise, and some people will think it's a green-blue cup, and other people will think it's a blue-green cup. They did an experiment. I learned this in grad school one day. You know that if you drive in public transportation in a bus, you have more personal space than you do in your car. But we feel like there's so much room when we're behind a wheel. It's a matter of perception. You look down that hallway. If this hallway was a mile long, your perceptions would tell you that you better get real low, because it's... You ever see those? You see that where someone walks into a room and it looks real big, and next thing you know, they're real small. because perceptions don't always tell us, they're not always correct about what we interpret. And I read this somewhere too, and I've been looking for it for over a year and I can't find it. I've read that an infant, when it's born, if you take a picture of the mother's face, first thing they see, mama. And you cut it up into pieces, the nose, the eyes, the ears, and you put it on a sheet in all different order. For 2 months, that child instantly recognizes its mother. But it gets to a certain time when spatial arrangements have to be correct or it doesn't know who it's looking at. In fact, your brain devotes half its brain power in the first 6 months just to spatial arrangements. We assume, well, of course, you know, you're what, about 3.5 feet away. Of course you are. There's no concept of space in what I'm going to call a virgin mind, a newborn. That perceptually all comes together and the brain works overtime because space is what allows us movement, and without movement, we're stuck. And the brain, in a lot of ways, when it comes to knowledge, works the same way. We need to start constructing things in our head. How many times you see something and you work off the perception you see? I do. First impressions, that's what we call them, first impressions. I work off the perceptions. Whether they're visual perceptions or whether you sense them. Do you ever have spiritual perceptions? Epiphanies? And they re-regulate the way we look at the world. Love at first sight. We're learning now it's really love at first smell. Our olfactory capacities are not as, we're not as aware of them as we used to be, but what first draws a person to another person is this, you emit something called a pheromone, P-H-E-R-M-O-N-E, and your body gets it. Your brain, you know, and your brain registers it, and we call that beauty. So beauty's in the eye of the beholder. And then you begin to make sense of it. Someone else looks at that person and goes, kind of coyote ugly to me. And so that's why I want to talk. It's all kind of flat. How do we make sense of the world? We just assume, of course, the world makes sense. No, it doesn't. The world is a construct, whether you use the tool of rationality, whether you use the tool of epiphany, where you get these amazing insights and suddenly, do you know what I'm talking about? It's like all the tumblers in a lock suddenly come together and it's like, wow, I never thought of it that way. And it radically changes the way you look at things. It suddenly clicks. Something clicks. And when it clicks, we get a perspective. We get a look. We see sometimes someone else says something and it locks into us. Or we say absolutely not and we never are open to it again. So, and this is something personally I think is real important to us that we just don't, I don't mean to be mean, we just don't go through life and just blasé, because what you believe determines what you do. And so have an understanding of who we are and how we know things about ourselves and about other people will help us as to how we relate to one another, because we are social beings. And there's no way we can get around it. Any questions for me? I don't mean to belabor it. I mean, I kind of get off on this stuff, but I get the feeling I'm probably the only one who's really getting off on it. Okay, cool. Sorry about that. That was kind of a rabbit hole. Am I doing okay? No. Don't mind me. Okay, so constructivism is a critique. We said about this. Foundationalism, rationality is a social construction, cannot be achieved without bias. When it says prejudice, it doesn't mean racial prejudice. It means you're disposed to your own subjectivity. This produces what we call cognitive relativism. Now, cognitive is a big word for knowledge, so your knowledge is relative to how you perceive things. They deny universal truths. It all depends on your perspective. Ethical relativism, same thing, denial of universal moral principles. Now, I want to share this video with you. This guy is super fast. I mean, he's got 2.5 watt motor just running his mouth, but I may stop it periodically, you know, because I want to say something, but I may just let him go. He's very good. I've never heard anyone have as clear, albeit fast, presentation of the difference between rationalism, which is the innate ideas that reason reveals to us through an a priori structure. We're hardwired. and empiricism, which is we get our knowledge from our sense experiences. So he's going to start with Descartes. I think, therefore I am. He's what we call a radical skeptic. He's going to say there's nothing in the world I can depend on except the fact that I know I'm thinking right now. And then he's going to try and reconstruct the world. And he's got a reason for how it stays in place. And then we're going to move to a fellow named John Locke, who's an empiricist, and he thinks we're blank when we're born, and perceptions give us information, and we build knowledge that way. And then he's going to revert back to a Scottish pastor named George Berkeley, who's going to kind of lean on Descartes, but he's going to make a few adjustments to it. Nothing about this lecture hinges on anything unless you put importance on it. But I want to expose you at least to the different schools of philosophy. And I would bet that many of you employ some of this without knowing that you're employing it. So just might clarify things for you. Oh, hang on a minute. 8:41. This is about 8 minutes long.
By the time we're done today, I just might have you questioning whether this apple is real or not. Think I can't do it? Give me about 10 minutes. I might have you wondering whether I'm a physical object or not. And the same goes for all this stuff. And for your computer, and Nick behind the camera, and you. How? By unleashing the power of empiricism. Last time, we learned about 17th century philosopher René Descartes and how he upended the apple basket that was his entire personal belief system and descended into a radical skepticism, only to emerge with his conviction that cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. This one idea, the fact that he was thinking, or really the fact that he was doubting, allowed him to build back up one by one more beliefs that he thought he could rely on. But in the end, most of the beliefs that Descartes ended up putting back into his intellectual apple basket had to do with the immaterial world. Like, he decided that he could believe that he existed as a thinking thing, and he believed that God existed. Ultimately, he lit upon the idea that some of our thoughts are clear and distinct in a way that somehow guarantees their truth. But a lot of philosophers disagreed. They argued that thinking on its own wasn't enough. Like, just because you're thinking doesn't mean that your thoughts correspond to material reality in any reliable way. Basically, Descartes' philosophical opponents thought that the cogito was a dead end. So here we start to see a split between two different understandings of how we can most reliably get to the nature of reality, and therefore truth. Both were responses to the constant questioning that is skepticism. On the one hand, there was rationalism, and on the other, empiricism. Descartes, like Plato before him, was a lover of reason. He met skepticism with rationalism. He believed that the most real things in life were ideas, propositions that can be known through pure reason. Deductive truths, which we talked about before, fall into this category, and mathematical truths do too. But by contrast, empiricism is based on the principle that the most reliable source of knowledge isn't our ideas or our reasoning, but our senses. Sure, we can know things through deduction and basic logic, but what actually leads us to truth, or at least gives us our best shot at getting there, are things like induction and the scientific method, ways of thinking that tell us about the material world. Probably the most famous split among philosophers between these two camps was the lifelong debate between Plato and Aristotle. Plato was convinced that truth resided in the immaterial world of ideas, while Aristotle's attention was focused firmly on the ground. But what about in Descartes' day? If he was the original prototype of the navel-gazing philosopher, a living example of rationalist thinking, then his foil was the 17th century English thinker John Locke. This is where he was born. Locke believed that we are all born as tabula rasa, or a blank slate. He argued that all knowledge is obtained through experience. He rejected the concept of